Dive 816 on the SMS König in Scapa, Scotland. This was part of a weeks-long trip with Clidive diving on the Huskyan dive boat. The König is one of the big 7 wrecks that were scuttled at Scapa at the end of World War I and is lying upside down and has been fairly heavily salvaged. We started off by descending here to one of the areas of salvage where you can see into one of the turbines. And around it there, just getting lit up by my torches, you can see the turbine blades as well, which have all gone a slightly pink colour with the marine growth on them. These ships were salvaged following their scuttling. The salvagers blew holes in the hull and made their way down to the most valuable parts of the wreck, but that does mean that a lot of the inner workings here are uncovered, and as divers we can go in and have a look now at the remains. Another shot of the turbine blades there. And then we started to head towards the stern of the wreck here, over some of the salvage damage, which creates a muddle of wreckage. Here we have a large hole in the wreck. It's about 2 meters in diameter and would be the bottom of the barbette for the rotating turrets. Again, the wreck is sitting upside down, so seeing the hole in the bottom of the wreck is actually the bottom of the turret there. Making our way through some of the twisted metal here to see some of the inner citadel armor plating. This area is fairly exposed to current, so we have a lot of plumeros and enemies here. There's my buddy swimming through a hole in the wreckage. And then after a look round here, we turned back and headed back to where we started the dive. Again, here's some of the twisted wreckage around the salvage area. And there is that turret hole from slightly further away. Continuing forward now. Again, this area is fairly heavily salvaged, so it's quite difficult to make out what everything is. But here we come across one of the yarrow boilers. Quite often on ships you see Scotch boiler types, whereas this wreck has some yarrow boilers, so that's the boiler tube in the middle there, and then all those pipes coming down is fairly unique to see on a wreck. So we have a pair of these small boilers here. These would not have been the main boilers, I don't think, because they're quite small compared to the size of the ship. There'll probably be some kind of secondary boiler for some of the systems. And there is the remains of the now quite fragile pipework. You can see some of it is starting to collapse. Continuing forward, we're now on top of the hull, so right at the top of the wreck, a bit shallower as well. And again here, swept by current, so you have all this soft coral growth on the top of the wreckage. Ballan Wrasse there, as well as a dead edible crab. Something's obviously got at that. And then we make our way up and over the side of the hull to drop down onto the side of the wreck. This area was described as the jail in our dive briefing. It's not actually a jail, but the armor plating has started to fall away here, leaving these ribs of metal and a dark area behind it. Here we have another yarrow boiler, This one was in an overhang, so it's quite difficult to make out with the limited light. And obviously some divers had been here before us because the silt had been stirred up around it. We exited out through a hole on the top of the wreck and came again to the top of the hole. Some kind of pipe there. And here we have Queen Scallop, the smaller kind of scallop you get in the UK, which up and made its way away from me as I approached. We had a little bit of dive time left here, so we continued down the top of the hole towards the front of the wreck. Could see some more salvage damage here. That panel's starting to come away, as well as some Pollock. The handy thing about these wrecks are because they're so large, you can shallow up while still on the wreckage, which meant although we had a total run time of about 51 minutes, we avoided having to do any decompression stops at the end. Max depth on this dive was about 32 meters. And then these are the final shots of the hole, looking round at the soft coral growth before we ascended on our DSMBs.